Hi students, I want to give you some tips and tricks for working on getting the electricity going on your soft sculpture. So you're going to begin with your LED bulb, and as you can see right here, I twisted the end of this so that I had two little loops. You can do this pretty easily with a pair of needle nose pliers by just inserting and kind of bending that around into a loop, and I think you can figure that out on your own. The next little tip I have is to make sure that wherever you decide to put your bulb, you sew that into place. If the bulb is floating around, it makes it really hard to work with. So just a couple of quick stitches through here will hold that in place while you're doing the wiring. And then that gets covered up in the end anyway. So we can just quickly tie a knot and then trim off the excess thread. And we're finished with that. The next thing I want to show you is a little bit about how to do your contact points. So we are creating a switch that works when the two contact points touch. So what I'm going to do is begin with a piece of the conductive thread, and I've got a knot tied here in the end of it, like so. I'm going to come up from the back and make a small stitch here, about 1/4 inch long. Then I'm going to repeat that process 3 more times. So I'm going to have 4 stitches that are stacked on top of each other. It makes kind of a little star pattern. Okay, and I've got a nice long piece of thread here that I am going to now need to decide where it goes next, which this one can go up to one side of the bulb. To make this stay where you want it to stay and not get short-circuited later, I'm going to sew my way up there, and what I'm going to do is just go very slightly into the back of the fabric so that you can't see it from the front side, but it holds on the back side. So I'm going to head up this way with my conductive thread. Keep going until I am up to that little loop that I made in the bulb. Then I'm going to sew the needle right through that loop. See that? I go through the loop with the needle and then bring the conductive thread through. Okay, so the thread is going through that little loop, and what I'm going to do next is now tie a knot. So I'm going to go up through there, loop that thread around. See how I did that? So it goes through the fabric, through the loop, and under the conductive thread. When I pull that, it's going to make a little knot right there. Because this thread with the wire in it is very thick, I'm going to do that again. So I went through the fabric, through the loop, and then through the loop that I created in the thread. And now I've got 2 knots there. Okay? So it's all knotted in there. And then I can trim this off. Not too close. And I've got my knot. Just to make sure it sticks, especially while I'm messing around with it and sewing it together, I'm going to put a small piece of electrical tape on there and push it down really hard. Okay. Now my next piece of conductive thread is going to go from the other side of the bulb. So same thing, I'm going to go through that. And since it's the beginning of where I'm sewing and not the end, I'm going to just tie that knot by hand. so I can very quickly tie that at least twice. 3 times is better, but I want to get the video finished. Trim off my excess. Another little piece of tape to hold that down. Okay. Now that end, that piece of conductive thread, I'm going to do the same process where I just skim through here. And I'm going to make it go down somewhere like the middle of the body-ish. And this is where the battery is going to be. So this part is going to connect to the battery. So I don't need to leave quite as much thread. So I'll leave maybe about 1.5 inches just to be sure. And then I'm going to connect this to the back of the battery, and I'll use just a tiny little bit of tape to do that. Like so. And turn that over. And the last place I need to sew is going to be from the other contact point that I create back to the other side of the battery. So I'm going to make this contact point just like I did the first one by going up, making a stitch that's about 1/4 inch long, and repeating that so that I have 4 stitches that are stacked kind of crossways on top of each other. Okay, turning it over. I know that this needs to go over and connect to the other side of the battery. So I'm going to do the same little trick where I go under, just little bits of fabric, until I get in the general neighborhood of where my battery is. Okay. Now obviously we don't want these wires to touch or it will short itself out and your bulb won't light up. So we want to make sure that there's some distance there. And then you're just going to tape that piece of thread to the other side of the battery, and then trim off your excess, like so. Now we'll give it a test. So we'll see if these two connect to make the battery light up. Ooh, they do not. Okay, so now we have to do a little problem solving. First thing that I would ask you to check is the polarity. So I'm just going to peel that piece of tape off. I see that this contact was going to the positive side, so I'm going to switch that because we need to pay attention to the polarity of everything. So I'm going to put the battery in the opposite way. Let's see if that works. Ta-da! It works. Okay, we know that the bulb is good because we tested that first. One benefit of doing this little sewing stitch on the back is that your wires don't get all jumbled around. When you go to sew it together, that makes things a lot easier and a lot more likely that it will also work when it's all sewn together. As a last step, I'm going to take another piece of tape and I'm just going to tape that battery into place. I'm just going to tape it right to the felt, push it in really good. It's a little bit long so I can trim that. And now I'm all ready to sew it together. Of course, this one for the demonstration didn't have all the great details, but yours will. Have fun and enjoy.